welcome to Christy Cooks for Life. I am making the roasted tomato flatbread today, and to get that started we need to roast our tomatoes. So in a bowl here I have 2 pints of the different kinds of cherry tomatoes. There's some heirloom tomatoes, some yellow tomatoes, and I just like to have a different mixture because it really makes it look prettier and gives a little different flavor. The recipe calls for about 5 cloves of garlic. My cloves of garlic were really big this time, so I only used 3, and I chopped them up super small. As you can see, I minced them up. I'm gonna put those right in with the tomatoes. I put in about 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, and I just really measure that in my hand. Just put a little, oops, that's way too much. Just like a little pocket in your hand and fill that up, and that's about a teaspoon. So I'm gonna do that twice. You know, when you're baking, you have to be a lot more specific than when you're just cooking, especially when you're just roasting some tomatoes. And then it does call for a little bit of black pepper, so I'm just gonna toss some black pepper in there. And olive oil, just gonna spin some olive oil around in there, about 2 to 3 tablespoons, just to coat the tomatoes. I'm gonna grab a spoon real quick and toss that together. This really has a lot of garlic in it, so if you don't like a lot of garlic, you might want to back off on the amount. And then once I get that all mixed together and the tomatoes are all coated, I'm going to bring it over a baking dish, or a cookie sheet I should say, and just pour those right out on the cookie sheet. Whoops, got my buzzer going off. I'm prep cooking some hard-boiled eggs for the week, so a little bit of a twofer right there. I'm going to use a spoon to get the rest of that garlic out of there because I love garlic, and I want to make sure that there's a lot of flavor on this flatbread. So I just toss that around till everything's coated and put it in the oven. I have the oven preheating at 300, and we're just going to toss it in the oven for about an hour. It's going to slow roast the tomatoes, and once those are done, we'll put the flatbread and get it in the oven now. So on my baking stone, I have the pizza crust already rolled out. Now, the recipe that you guys have has the pizza dough recipe that I normally use, but under the circumstances with our stay-at-home order, we are trying to go to the grocery store just once a week or as little as possible. So I did not have any yeast, so I found a recipe actually on Pinterest for a no yeast crust recipe. So we're gonna see how that works. The recipe called for baking powder instead of the yeast or baking soda, and I actually have this Heinz Pure Food salt-free or sodium-free baking powder, so that's really going to help us cut down on the sodium as well. The recipe also called for like a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, but I just left that out because I don't think we're going to miss it. So I have that rolled out on the stone, and then because this is a flatbread and not a pizza, you actually put the cheese on the crust first. So I'm gonna go ahead and spread out my mozzarella cheese. Had a little bit left in that bag, so I didn't want to waste it. We're just gonna cover the crust. You don't need to use this whole bag unless you want to, but you have to think about the sodium content in the cheese when you're considering how much you want to use. So make sure you take that into consideration. And as you can see, this crust is rolled out a little bit rustic, so it's not perfect. Doesn't have to be perfect. So let me get this cheese so it's nicely distributed. Get it all the way up to the edges of the crust. Then I had some frozen spinach. Excuse me, I usually like to use fresh spinach, but again, I didn't have that, so I thawed out some spinach that I had in the freezer. And make sure you squish all the water out of that as much as you can so it doesn't make your pizza soggy. I'm not putting a whole lot of this on here, but just enough to kind of spread it out around the pizza evenly. This is just a great example of how you can make something with what you have available to you. It doesn't have to be exactly what the recipe says. You can improvise. You could even use kale or some other kind of green if you preferred. I'm not a huge fan of kale, but if I had to, I would. So look how amazing these tomatoes came out. They're nice and caramelized, and they're gonna make a delicious flatbread. So we're gonna just spread those out. I'm gonna get my hands in here. I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. Makes it go faster, and it makes it a more even consistency. So we're gonna get these all spread out on the pizza, or the flatbread, I guess I should say. Some of that garlic on there. And once we get this all evenly distributed, I have the oven at 400 degrees preheating, so it won't take too terribly long once we get it in the oven. We are actually going to bake it until it's almost done, and then we're gonna pull it out, and I'm gonna chop up some fresh basil and put that over the top, and then put it back in the oven to finish it off. So just got a few more tomatoes here. As you can see, those 2 pints was just the perfect amount to cover this pizza on the stone. If you make a bigger pizza or multiple pizzas, you could always use more tomatoes. You just have to make sure you get them roasted up before you start. Alrighty, so that is the flatbread all put together. I'm gonna put that in the oven for, until the cheese is golden brown. I'd say about 20 minutes. All right, everybody, we have the finished product of our flatbread. I know I keep saying pizza, but they're kind of interchangeable. But this is a roasted tomato basil flatbread. I had some fresh basil that I chiffonade and then chopped up real fine and sprinkled across the top about the last 5 minutes it was baking. And you can see it came out golden brown and looks delicious. If you look under here, the dough looks awesome. It's nice and golden brown. Hopefully it tastes great, and I hope you enjoyed this recipe. This is Christy from Christy Cooks for Life. Enjoy every day.